The Black Widow had given a rancher shelter through the storm, and by morning she was forced to marry him or be accused of sin. Zora Baptist stood on her porch as dawn broke over the Wyoming territory. Her hands gripped the weathered wood railing. Behind her, the Irish rancher she'd pulled from death's door shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. Reverend Silas Whitmore led the mob of townspeople across her frozen yard. His black coat billowed in the morning wind. Mrs. Caldwell walked beside him, her face twisted with righteous fury. Sheriff Briggs followed, his eyes fixed on the ground. The preacher stopped at the base of her steps. His pale eyes swept over Zora's disheveled dress, then to Declan O'Sullivan's torn shirt and makeshift sling. "You've brought shame upon this God-fearing community." Whitmore's voice carried across the stillness. An unmarried woman harboring a man overnight. The decent folks of this territory will not stand for such behavior. Zora's jaw tightened. The wind whipped strands of dark hair across her face. She did not brush them away. "I saved a man's life, nothing more." Mrs. Caldwell pointed an accusing finger. "Decent women don't behave this way. Not with strangers, not overnight." The crowd murmured agreement. Faces she recognized from town gathered in judgment. The baker who sold her flour. The general store clerk who counted her coins twice. The seamstress who hemmed her dresses with reluctant precision. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward. His badge caught the morning light. "The law is clear, Zora. Moral turpitude charges will be filed unless you make this right." Declan moved beside her. His green eyes flashed with anger despite his wounded state. "This is madness. The woman showed Christian charity during a blizzard that would have killed me." Whitmore's lips curled. "We know what charity looks like between your kind and hers." The words hung in the frozen air. Zora felt the familiar burn of injustice. In her chest, the same fire that had sustained her through Marcus's death. The same rage that kept her working this land when others whispered she couldn't manage alone. Judge Harrington climbed from his wagon. His hands trembled as he straightened. His coat, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. "The territorial laws are specific about cohabitation between unmarried persons." His voice wavered. "The penalties are severe: loss of property rights, public censure, criminal charges." Zora studied the judge's face. Something flickered behind his eyes. Fear, not disgust or moral outrage. Fear. The crowd pressed closer. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air. Their faces held the eager anticipation of those about to witness a reckoning. She looked at Declan, this stranger who had collapsed on her doorstep 18 hours ago. Blood seeping through his coat. Desperation in his whispered plea for help. The memory surfaced unbidden. The worst blizzard in years howling outside her windows. The pounding on her door that cut through the wind's scream. His body heavy and warm as she dragged him inside. The bullet wound high on his shoulder. His respectful gratitude as she cleaned and bandaged the injury. They had spoken little through the long night. He had told her about claimed jumpers who shot him and scattered his cattle. She had shared only what politeness required. Two strangers taking shelter from the storm, nothing more. Nothing that warranted this gathering, this ultimatum. Whitmore stepped closer to the porch. "Choose quickly, woman. My patience wears thin." Zora's mind raced through possibilities. All led to the same destination, her reputation destroyed. Her land ownership questioned. Her independence stripped away by laws designed to control women like her. Marcus had warned her about men like Whitmore, had spoken of the dangers that came with success, the threats that followed prosperity. She thought of her late husband's words, the conversations they'd shared about the mineral deposits he'd found on their property, the surveys he'd commissioned in secret, the plans they'd made for their future. The future someone had stolen when they killed him. Declan's voice cut through her thoughts. "I'll marry her." The words surprised them both. He straightened despite his injury, met Whitmore's gaze with steady defiance. "But I won't have it said that either of us brought shame to this community. We'll marry to satisfy your laws, nothing more." Whitmore smiled. The expression held no warmth. "Judge Harrington will perform the ceremony immediately." The judge's hands shook as he opened his leather satchel. Papers rustled in the wind. His voice barely carried as he began the legal recitation. Zora watched his trembling fingers. Noted. The sweat despite the cold. The way his eyes darted to Whitmore between each phrase. This man was not acting from moral conviction. He was acting from fear. The ceremony passed in a blur of required words and witness signatures. Mrs. Caldwell and 2 other women signed as witnesses. Their faces showed satisfaction at a crisis properly resolved. When Judge Harrington closed his book, Zora found herself married to a stranger, bound by law to a man she'd known for less than a day. The crowd began to disperse. Their entertainment concluded. Whitmore lingered, his pale eyes studying Zora's face. "I trust you'll both remember your Christian duties now." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Good day, Mrs. O'Sullivan." The name sounded foreign on his tongue, foreign in her ears. As the last wagon disappeared down the rutted road, silence settled over the homestead. Zora remained on the porch. Declan stood beside her, equally still. The wind carried the scent of snow and sagebrush. In the distance, her cattle moved across the winter pasture. The same land Marcus had worked. The same earth he had died defending. Now it belonged to a stranger, at least legally. The thought struck her like a physical blow. In trying to protect her independence, she had lost it completely. Declan cleared his throat. "I'll find a way to undo this. I give you my word." She turned to study his face. Found sincerity in his green eyes. Something else, too, regret that matched her own. "Words are easy, Mr. O'Sullivan." She tested his name on her tongue. "Actions tell the truth." He nodded slowly. Understood the weight of what had just transpired. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning frost. Another day beginning in the Wyoming Territory. Another day in a life suddenly and irrevocably changed. Zora Baptist O'Sullivan stepped inside her house. Her husband followed. The door closed behind them with quiet finality. The barn smelled of hay and leather and honest work. Declan arranged his bedroll in the corner, farthest from the house. The distance felt necessary, proper. Zora watched from the doorway as he settled his few possessions. His saddlebags, a worn rifle, the clothes on his back. "You don't have to sleep out here." "I do." He tested his wounded shoulder against the barn wall. "This marriage wasn't your choice. I won't make it harder than it already is." She nodded once, stepped back into the cold evening air. The first week passed in careful choreography. He rose before dawn to tend her cattle. She prepared meals for 2 instead of 1. They ate in silence that felt heavy with unspoken boundaries. His shoulder healed slowly. She changed his bandages each morning without meeting his eyes. Her hands were gentle but distant, professional. He noticed things. The way she checked the horizon constantly. How she counted the cattle twice each evening. The rifle she kept within arm's reach, even inside the house. A woman living in fear. The second week brought conversation. Small exchanges over coffee. Comments about the weather. Observations about the land. Declan mended her broken fence posts. Repaired the barn door that had hung crooked since before. Marcus died. Fixed things a woman alone couldn't manage easily. Zora watched him work. Noted his respectful manner with her livestock. The way he asked permission before moving anything. How he cleaned his tools after each use. Different from other white men who'd worked this land. Different from the ones who looked at her with barely concealed contempt. On the 14th night, she found him studying tracks near the creek. His body tense with professional attention. "What do you see?" He pointed to hoofprints in the mud. 3 riders. Been watching the house. Recent. Her blood chilled. How recent? Yesterday, maybe the day before. She knelt beside him. Studied. The signs he indicated. I've seen strange tracks before. Thought it was drifters passing through. These aren't drifters. His voice carried certainty. They're scouting, planning something. The wind picked up across the creek, bent the winter grass toward the house. Zora straightened, made a decision that had been building for days. There's something you should know about Marcus. About how he died. They walked back to the house in silence. She poured coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Set the cups on the table between them. The sheriff said it was an accident. Horse spooked. Threw him against the rocks by the north pasture. Declan waited. Sensed the weight of what she wasn't saying. But Marcus knew horses better than any man in the territory. Rode since he was 5 years old. That horse had been gentle as a lamb for 8 years. She stared into her coffee. The surface reflected lamplight. I found the horse 3 miles away. No saddle, no bridle. Standing calm in Miller's pasture. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, coyotes began their evening song. You think someone killed him? I know someone killed him. Her voice held granite certainty. Question is why? Declan leaned forward. His detective instincts stirred after months of lying dormant. What was Marcus working on before he died? Any business dealings? Disputes with neighbors? Zora stood from the table, walked to the stone hearth, and ran her fingers along the mortar between 2 specific rocks. One stone shifted. Behind it was a hidden compartment. She took out a leather journal wrapped in oilcloth and placed it before him with quiet reverence. Marcus found something on our land, something valuable. Declan opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with survey notes, geological observations, sketches of rock formations, and detailed measurements, all written in Marcus's precise handwriting. Mineral deposits, he said, tracing a finger along the notations. Silver, maybe copper. Enough to make us rich, enough to change everything. The weight of what this meant settled between them. Land rich in minerals would attract attention, often the wrong kind. Who else knew about this? No one. Marcus was cautious. He planned to file claims quietly and bring in surveyors from Denver. Declan kept reading. He found references to strange visitors, townspeople asking suspicious questions, and overly generous offers for what seemed like ordinary ranch land. Someone must have suspected something, he said, closing the journal. Word got out. Zora returned to her seat, her face showing the exhaustion of carrying secrets alone. I've been trying to find out who. Watching, listening, tracking for 6 months. And nothing concrete. Just suspicions and fears. The fire dimmed, and shadows crept into the corners of the room. Declan studied the woman across from him, this widow who had fought her battles alone, who had saved him and lost her freedom doing so. I haven't been completely honest either, he said to her. Eyes sharpened, focused on him with fresh interest. I'm not just a rancher. I used to work for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. I specialized in land fraud and mining investigations. That truth shifted the balance between them. Used to? My last case went wrong. My partner died because of a bad call I made. The agency let me go. I've been drifting ever since. Zora processed this. She measured his confession against her own growing need for help. Those tracks by the creek, you've seen signs like that before. Professional surveillance, someone's planning something. The wind rattled the windows, reminding them of how isolated they were. Zora made a choice, one that felt like stepping into the unknown. I can't do this alone anymore. I need help. I'll help, he said without hesitation. But we need to do it right, gather evidence, build a case that will stand in court. She nodded and reached out across the table. He took her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused from hard work, Partners then. Until we find out who killed Marcus. Partners. The word felt unfamiliar. She'd been alone so long that the idea of working with someone felt impossible. But as they sat by the fading fire and began planning their investigation, something inside her eased. The weight of the secret wasn't hers alone anymore. Outside, the coyotes howled. Inside, two people who had once been strangers began working together. The tracks by the creek warned of coming danger. But for the first time since Marcus's death, Zora wouldn't face it alone. Morning would bring new challenges and risks. That night, they made plans. At dawn, they rode out to the site where Marcus had died. The north pasture stretched empty beneath a gray sky. Winter grass bent under the weight of their horses' hooves. Declan dismounted near a rocky outcropping and studied the area with sharp eyes. The weather had erased many signs, but stone kept secrets longer than soil. "Show me where you found him." Zora pointed to a dip between two boulders. "There, face down, blood on the rocks." He knelt, running his fingers along dark stains that even the rain hadn't washed away. He found scratch marks in the granite. These don't look like the result of a fall. They're too deliberate. Someone staged this. Zora watched him work, this man who noticed patterns she hadn't, who read the land like a map. Someone arranged it to look like an accident. The wind carried the scent of snow from the mountains. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. They spent the morning gathering evidence, measuring, sketching, building a picture of a murder disguised as misfortune. By afternoon, they had a timeline. Marcus was killed elsewhere. His body was moved. His horse set loose far away to support the story of an accident. Whoever did this knew the land, knew where Marcus rode and his routines. Zora's hands clenched the reins. Someone local. Then, they headed toward town as the first snowflakes fell. They now had facts. What they needed were connections. The general store was busy with gossip. Mrs. Henley was weighing flour and talking about local news. The Morrison twins bickered over candy. Old Pete warmed his hands by the stove. Himself by the pot-bellied stove. Zora entered first. Let conversations continue around her while she gathered supplies. Declan followed minutes later, maintaining the pretense of separate errands. Mrs. Henley's voice carried across the store. "Shame about the Walker place. Third family this year to lose their land. Hard times for everyone," Pete muttered. "Especially folks of certain backgrounds." Zora stilled, focused on the conversation while examining bolt fabric. Heard tell Reverend Whitmore's been counseling the bereaved families, helping them find buyers for their properties. Christian charity, Mrs. Henley agreed. Good to see someone looking after the unfortunate. Declan caught Zora's eye across the store. Both had heard the significance. 3 families, all losing land, all receiving help from the same source. They finished their purchases in silence, met at the creek south of town where words could be spoken safely. Walker, Johnson, and Freeman. Zora named the families they'd heard mentioned. All colored. All owned good land with water rights. All dead or gone within 8 months. The pattern emerged stark and undeniable. Systematic targeting. Organized theft disguised as tragedy and charity. "We need to visit the Walker place, see what's left." The abandoned homestead sat empty against the darkening sky. Windows stared blank as dead eyes. The front door hung open, creaking in the wind. Inside, they found the debris of interrupted lives. Scattered furniture, personal belongings left behind in haste. The detritus of dreams abandoned. Declan searched methodically. Found survey stakes hidden in the barn. Official-looking documents stuffed behind loose floorboards. Mining claims filed 2 weeks after Walker died. Zora examined the papers, recognized the legal language that transformed private property into corporate assets. Filed by Whitmore on behalf of Rocky Mountain Mining Consortium. The final piece clicked into place. The Reverend wasn't just offering spiritual comfort. He was orchestrating theft on an industrial scale. Marcus wasn't the first. Won't be the last unless we stop this. They rode home through gathering dusk. Snow fell heavier now, dusting the ground with winter's promise. The investigation had revealed truth. But truth without proof was just suspicion. At the house, Zora prepared dinner while Declan tended the horses. Domestic routine that felt natural despite their strange circumstances. She found herself watching him through the kitchen window, noted his gentle handling of the animals, the way he spoke quietly to calm a nervous Mar. Marcus had possessed that same patience with livestock, that same understanding of creatures that couldn't speak their needs. The comparison surprised her. When had she started measuring Declan against her late husband's memory? When had he stopped being a stranger forced into her life? He entered the kitchen, stamping snow from his boots. Hung his coat by the door with careful precision. Storm's getting worse. We'll be snowed in for a day or two. She ladled stew into bowls, set them on the table they'd begun to share without conscious decision. Gives us time to plan our next move. They ate by lamplight, discussed strategies for gathering more evidence, ways to connect Whitmore directly to the murders. But beneath the professional conversation, something else flowed. An awareness that had been building through shared work and common purpose. Zora noticed the way candlelight caught the copper threads in his dark hair. How his eyes softened when he spoke. About justice for Marcus. Declan saw her strength masked as stubborn independence. The vulnerability she guarded behind walls, built from necessity. After dinner, they sat by the fire planning their approach to Judge Harrington. The man who'd married them with trembling hands and frightened eyes. He knows something. Question is whether we can get him to talk. Fear makes people unpredictable, Declan observed. Could help us or destroy us. The fire burned low. Outside, wind howled around the house with winter's fury. They were truly isolated now. Cut off from the world by weather and circumstance. Zora rose to bank the coals. Declan moved to help. Their hands brushed, reaching for the poker. The contact lasted seconds. Both froze. Acknowledged the spark that had nothing to do with the hearth. She stepped back first. Put distance between them that felt necessary and impossible. I should let you rest. Tomorrow we'll need clear heads. He nodded, understanding the retreat, respecting the boundaries she needed to maintain. But as she climbed the stairs to the bedroom they didn't share, both carried the memory of that brief touch. The recognition of something growing despite the walls they'd built. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, two people fought battles that had nothing to do with murder or mining claims. The investigation had brought them together. Shared danger was forging. Partnership into something deeper. Neither spoke of it. Neither acknowledged the shift. But the truth hung between them, heavy as the snow that trapped them together through the long winter night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight brought the quiet terror of hearts beginning to heal. The storm passed but left frost thick on the windows. Zora woke to find Declan already gone from the barn, his horse missing from the corral. She found his note on the kitchen table. Terse words about riding to town, checking on Judge Harrington, back by evening. The abandonment stung more than it should have. They were partners in investigation, nothing more. His movements didn't require her permission. But the empty house felt wrong, the silence too complete. She spent the morning tending chores, feeding livestock, mending harness leather. Tasks that usually brought satisfaction now felt hollow. By afternoon, restlessness drove her outdoors. She followed the creek downstream, noting fresh tracks. The same 3 horses from before. Closer to the house now. Fear prickled along her spine. Someone was escalating surveillance. Declan returned at sunset, riding hard, his face grim with whatever he'd learned in town. Harrington's son is missing, been gone 3 days. The words hit like cold water. Another piece of the conspiracy's puzzle. Kidnapped? Or worse, Judge is terrified, drinking heavily, muttering about sins coming home. They ate supper in tense silence. The investigation had taken a darker turn. Children were now at risk. After dinner, Declan spread his notes across the table, maps of affected properties, timeline of deaths and disappearances, pattern of mineral claims filed by the mining consortium. It's bigger than we thought, goes beyond local corruption. Zora studied the documents, saw the scope of organized theft stretching across the territory. How many people are involved? Dozens, maybe more. This operation has been running for years. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, coyotes began their evening chorus. There's something else. Declan's voice carried reluctance. About my time with Pinkerton. She looked up from the papers. Saw trouble in his expression. I was investigating a mining company, Rocky Mountain Consortium. Same one that's filing claims here. The connection struck her like lightning. Too convenient to be coincidence. My partner got too close to the truth. They killed him, made it look like an accident. Her blood chilled. And you think that's why you ended up here? On my land? I don't know. Could be coincidence. Could be they're still hunting me. The possibility hung between them. That his presence had brought additional danger to her doorstep. Zora stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at darkness that might hide watchers. So you might be the reason they're watching my house, the reason Marcus died. I don't know. His honesty cut deeper than lies would have. It's possible. She turned to face him, this man she'd begun to trust, who might have led killers to her door. Get out. The words came without thought, born from fear and betrayal and the terrible. Need to blame someone for her losses. Zora, please. Let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying since you arrived. How you might have gotten my husband killed. He stood slowly, his face pale in the lamplight. I never lied about wanting to help you. Help? She laughed bitterly. You've made everything worse. The accusation struck him like a physical blow. She saw him flinch, saw the guilt he'd been carrying surface in his eyes. Maybe you're right. He gathered his papers, his few possessions, moved toward the door with quiet dignity. I'll sleep in town tonight, give you space to think. After he left, the house felt cavernous, empty in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. Zora sat by the dying fire, replayed their conversation, heard the hurt in his voice when she'd ordered him away. But doubt had taken root, poisoned the trust they'd been building. Morning brought no clarity, just the hollow ache of solitude she'd thought she'd grown accustomed to. She rode to town seeking answers, found Declan at the hotel, preparing to leave, running away. The question came out harsher than intended. Giving you what you asked for. Space. His saddlebags were packed, his horse saddled, everything ready for departure. The investigation isn't finished. You can handle it alone. You're stronger than you know, she wanted to argue, to call him back, but pride kept her silent. He mounted his horse, looked down at her with eyes that held regret and something deeper. For what it's worth, meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in years. Then he was gone, riding toward the horizon while she stood frozen in the dusty street. The next 3 days passed in stubborn solitude. She continued investigating, alone, following leads that led nowhere, gathering evidence that felt incomplete, without his trained eye. On the 4th morning, she woke to silence, wrong silence, the kind that meant her livestock were disturbed. She grabbed her rifle, stepped onto the porch, found herself facing 3 mounted men. Jake Hutchins sat his horse with casual menace, Whitmore's foreman. known for his quick temper and heavy fists. "Mrs. O'Sullivan, you've been asking questions around town." His companions flanked him. Hard men with cold eyes and ready weapons. Free country, last I heard. Not for folks who don't know when to mind their own business. She kept the rifle ready. Calculated distances. Odds of reaching cover. Your husband learned that lesson too late. Shame you didn't learn from his example. The threat hung explicit in the morning air. No pretense now, no careful maneuvering. "What do you want?" "A conversation, private-like, away from curious eyes." One of his men dismounted, moved to flanker position. The other held a coiled rope, not a social call, an abduction. "I think I'll pass on that invitation. Wasn't really asking." The man with the rope spurred his horse forward. Zora swung her rifle toward him. Hutchins drew faster. The shot echoed across the empty land. Her rifle spun from hands gone suddenly numb. Before she could move, rough hands seized her arms, bound her wrists with practiced efficiency. Boss don't like to be kept waiting. They threw her across a saddle, led her away from the house that had been her sanctuary. Behind them, her cattle wandered unattended. The investigation lay abandoned. Her husband's killer rode free. And Declan was gone. The thought brought fresh pain. She'd driven away the one person who might have helped. Let pride and fear destroy the partnership that had given her hope. Now she rode toward whatever fate Whitmore had planned. Alone except for regret and the bitter knowledge that trust, once broken, couldn't be easily mended. The sun climbed higher. The horses carried her toward answers she no longer wanted to face. They dragged her to the abandoned silver mine in Devil's Canyon. The entrance yawned black against red stone. Timber supports rotted from years of neglect. Hutchins shoved her into the darkness. Her boots scraped against loose rock. Water dripped somewhere in the depths. Cozy place for a final conversation. He lit a lantern. Shadows danced on the tunnel walls. The air smelled of earth and decay and old fear. Your husband thought he was clever, hiding his mineral surveys, playing games with powerful men. Zora's wrists burned where the ropes cut into skin. But her voice stayed steady. Marcus was honest. "More than I can say for present company." Hutchins backhanded her casually. The blow snapped her head sideways. Blood filled her mouth. "Honesty's a luxury poor folks can't afford, especially your kind." He produced a folded document from his coat. "Survey papers covered with official seals. This here's the deed to your property. All legal and proper. Soon as you sign it over to the mining company." She spat blood at his feet. "I'd rather die first. That can be arranged." "Matter of fact, it's already been arranged. Tragic mining accident. Happens all the time to folks who wander where they shouldn't." The lantern flame guttered in a draft. Somewhere above, timber creaked under the weight of unstable earth. "Sign the papers, Mrs. O'Sullivan. Make this easy on yourself." "Go to hell." Hutchins smiled without warmth. Drew his pistol. Pressed the barrel against her temple. Last chance. The metal felt cold against her skin. Final. She thought of Marcus. Of Declan riding away with hurt in his eyes. Of chances lost to pride and fear. Hoofbeats echoed from the canyon entrance. Multiple riders approaching fast. Hutchins cursed. Motioned his men toward defensive positions. The pistol wavered away. From her head, "Boss said you might have help coming." Voices carried from outside, men calling orders. The sound of boots on stone. Then Declan's voice, clear and commanding. "This is Pinkerton Detective Declan O'Sullivan. You're surrounded. Release the woman and surrender." Relief flooded through her. He'd come back, despite her harsh words. Despite driving him away, Hutchins grabbed her arm, used her as a shield, while backing deeper into the mine. "Nice try, Irish, but the lady's coming with us. Let her go, Hutchins." This is between you and me." The foreman's grip tightened. His gun pressed against her ribs. "Walk slow toward the back tunnel. Anyone follows, she dies." They moved through narrowing passages. The lantern light barely pushed back consuming darkness. Behind them, footsteps echoed, pursuing but cautious. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Mining equipment lay scattered in the dust. Picks and shovels abandoned when the silver played out. Hutchins pushed her against the far wall. Kept his gun trained on the entrance. "Should have minded your own business, woman. Should have taken the money and run, like the other families. The ones you murdered? Business is business. Nothing personal." A shadow moved at the tunnel mouth. Declan appeared, hands raised but eyes alert. Behind him, another figure emerged from the darkness. Judge Harrington stepped into the lantern light. His face haggard but determined. "It's over, Hutchins. I'm done being your puppet." The foreman's eyes narrowed. "Where's your boy, Judge? Still want to see him alive?" "My son escaped 3 days ago. Been hiding at the church. Reverend Collins has been protecting him." The words hit Hutchins harder than any bullet. His carefully constructed leverage crumbled. "You're lying. Check for yourself. Your whole operation is finished. Whitmore's been arrested. Mining companies under federal investigation." Zora saw the moment when Hutchins realized his position, trapped in a dead-end tunnel. His bosses captured or fled, nothing left but desperate violence. "Maybe so, but I'm taking some folks with me." He swung the gun toward Declan, finger tightening on the trigger. Zora threw herself sideways, slammed into Hutchins' gun arm. The shot went wide, echoing through the chamber. All 3 men moved. At once, Declan lunged forward. Judge Harrington grabbed a mining pick. Hutchins tried to swing his pistol back toward Zora. She rolled behind falling timbers, heard the sounds of struggle. Shouts and curses. Another gunshot that made her ears ring, then silence. Declan's voice, breathing hard but alive. "It's over." She emerged from cover to find Hutchins on the ground, clutching a wounded shoulder. His gun lay several feet away. Judge Harrington stood over him with the mining pick raised. "He killed my partner in Denver. Been hunting him for months." Declan knelt beside her. Cut the ropes binding her wrists with gentle hands. "Are you hurt?" She flexed her fingers. Felt circulation returning. Looked into his green eyes and saw worry that went deeper than professional concern. "I'm fine." "How did you find me?" "Saw the signs from town. 3 riders heading toward your place. Got there in time to track you here." Judge Harrington helped secure Hutchins with his own rope. The fight had gone out of the foreman. He knew the game was finished. "We have enough evidence to convict. The whole organization, your husband's murder, the other killings, federal charges for conspiracy and land fraud." They walked toward daylight, left the darkness of the mine behind. Outside, the sun felt warm against Zora's face. Sheriff Briggs waited with a deputy, took custody of Hutchins without meeting anyone's eyes. His complicity in the conspiracy would be dealt with later. Judge Harrington climbed into his buggy. Looked older but somehow lighter. The weight of coercion lifted from his shoulders. "Thank you both for giving me the courage to do what was right." As the law officers departed with their prisoner, Zora and Declan stood alone in the canyon. The silence felt different now, comfortable instead of tense. "I owe you an apology." Her voice came quietly. "What I said about you bringing danger, about lying. I was scared and angry and wrong. You had every right to be angry. I should have told you about Pinkerton from the beginning." The wind stirred dust between them, carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "I thought you'd left for good. So did I. Got about 10 miles before I realized I couldn't abandon you. Couldn't abandon this." He gestured between them. The partnership that had become something deeper. What is this, exactly? The question hung in the desert air, waiting for courage to answer it honestly. I don't know. His eyes met hers. But I'd like to find out, if you're willing. She thought of the empty house, the investigation they'd built together, the way he'd risked everything to save her. I'm willing. The words felt dangerous and necessary. Truth spoken despite fear. They rode home through afternoon light, side by side. Partners in justice and something else they were just beginning to name. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Federal prosecutors laid out the conspiracy with methodical precision. Dozens of witnesses testified. Documents filled evidence tables like autumn leaves. Reverend Whitmore sat in shackles, his pale eyes empty of their former righteousness. Jake Hutchins slumped beside him, shoulders still bandaged from the mine confrontation. Zora testified on the second day. Spoke Marcus's name aloud in the courtroom. Described finding his body. The staged accident scene. The months of investigation. That followed. Her voice never wavered. The jury listened with respectful attention. Declan testified about the mining company's methods. The systematic targeting of black landowners. The murders disguised as accidents or natural causes. Judge Harrington provided the final nail. Revealed the blackmail that had forced his cooperation. Produced correspondence linking the conspiracy to Eastern financial interests. The verdicts came swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Whitmore received 20 years in federal prison. Hutchins got 15. 3 other conspirators drew sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. Justice served cold but thorough. The town held a celebration afterward. Families who'd lost property received compensation. Land titles were restored. The mining company's illegal claims were voided. But some wounds ran deeper than legal remedies could heal. Mrs. Caldwell still crossed the street to avoid Zora. The baker weighed her flour with grudging accuracy. Small prejudices persisted beneath the surface of newfound respect. Change came. Slowly to places like this, but it came. Esther hugged Zora outside the courthouse. Her friend's eyes bright with unshed tears. Marcus would be proud. You got justice for him and everyone else. We got justice. Couldn't have done it alone. She looked toward Declan, who stood talking quietly with Judge Harrington. Their partnership had evolved through shared danger and mutual trust. Now came the harder question. What happened next? They rode home together through golden afternoon light. The conspiracy was finished. The killers punished. Their forced marriage could be legally dissolved with a simple petition. Nothing bound them together now except choice. That evening, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains. Coffee steamed in their cups. The familiar ritual of partnership continued. Judge Harrington filed the annulment papers today. Zora's heart stuttered. She kept her voice steady. I figure he would. Should be finalized within the week. Then you'll be free. Free, the word should have brought relief. Instead, it felt hollow as wind through empty rooms. What about you? Will you go back to detective work? Declan sipped his coffee. Studied the horizon where stars were beginning to appear. Had an interesting conversation with the territorial governor today. He's offered us positions as federal investigators. Working together, if we're interested. The possibility hung between them. Professional partnership extending into the future. Us? Seems our methods impressed some important people. They want a team that understands land fraud, mining conspiracies, the kind of crimes that target vulnerable communities. She absorbed this information, pictured them riding to other territories, solving other cases, fighting other injustices. Sounds dangerous. Probably. But necessary work. The night deepened around them. Coyotes sang in the distance. The same wild music that had accompanied their first real conversation. There's another option. His voice carried carefully controlled hope. We could get married. Again, for real this time, because we choose to. Not because some preacher forces us. The proposal settled between them. Simple words that carried weight of futures imagined and feared. Zora set down her coffee cup, turned to face him fully. Why? Because I love you. 3 words spoken quietly. Without drama or flourish. Truth offered plain and honest. Because somewhere between that first night and yesterday's rescue, you became the most important thing in my life. She studied his face in the starlight, saw sincerity in his green eyes, the same steadiness that had carried them through investigation. And danger, I love you too. The admission felt both terrifying and inevitable. Recognition of feelings that had grown despite fear and circumstance. But I've been alone so long. Independent so long. I don't know how to be half of something. He reached across the space between their chairs, took her hand in his. Calloused fingers. We'll figure it out together. 2 people choosing each other every day, building something new. The warmth of his touch spread through her, chased away the chill of solitary evenings and empty conversations. The territorial governor can wait for his answer. How long? Until after our real wedding, the one we plan ourselves. 3 months. Later, they stood before Reverend Collins in the small church. Esther served as matron of honor. Judge Harrington walked Zora down the aisle in Marcus's memory. The ceremony was simple. Honest vows spoken before friends who truly supported their union. No force, no ultimatums. No mob demanding compliance with twisted morality. Just 2 people choosing love over fear. Their reception filled the church hall. Black families and white families sitting together, eating Esther's cornbread and Mrs. Morrison's apple pie, celebrating justice and new beginnings. When the dancing started, Declan led Zora onto the floor. They moved together with the same partnership that had carried them through investigation and danger. Any regrets, Mrs. O'Sullivan? She smiled at the name she'd chosen to keep. Badge of honor earned through trials survived together. None, you. Only that it took a blizzard and forced marriage to find you. The music swirled around them. Their friends laughed and celebrated. Outside, Wyoming territory stretched vast and wild under endless stars. 6 months later, they received their first federal assignment. Land fraud case in Colorado Territory. Another conspiracy targeting immigrant families. They packed their belongings with practiced efficiency. Left trusted neighbors to tend their combined ranch. Rode toward new challenges with matched purpose. The work was dangerous. Necessary. Exactly what they'd been shaped to do. At night, camped under foreign stars, they planned strategies and shared dreams, partners in every sense, equals in law and love and the pursuit of justice. The black widow who'd given shelter to a wounded stranger had found something she'd never expected to want again. A future built on choice instead of circumstance. Love grown from respect instead of passion. Partnership that made both of them stronger. Some stories began with endings. This one began with a beginning that promised to last. And that is all. To the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.